The President of the United States is the head of state and head of government of the United States, indirectly elected to a 4-year term via the Electoral College. The officeholder leads the executive branch of the federal government and is the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. Since the office was established in 1789, 45 men have served in 46 presidencies. The first president, George Washington, won a unanimous vote of the Electoral College. Grover Cleveland served 2 non-consecutive terms and is therefore counted as the 22nd and 24th President of the United States, giving rise to the discrepancy between the number of presidencies and the number of individuals who have served as president. The presidency of William Henry Harrison, who died 31 days after taking office in 1841, was the shortest in American history. Franklin D. Roosevelt served the longest, over 12 years, before dying early in his 4th term in 1945. He is the only U.S. president to have served more than 2 terms. Since the ratification of the 22nd Amendment to the United States Constitution in 1951, no person may be elected president more than twice, and no one who has served more than 2 years of a term to which someone else was elected may be elected more than once. 4 presidents died in office of natural causes: William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Warren G. Harding, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. 4 were assassinated: Abraham Lincoln, James A. Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy, and 1 resigned, Richard Nixon, facing impeachment and removal from office. John Tyler was the first vice president to assume the presidency during a presidential term, and set the precedent that a vice president who does so becomes the fully functioning president with his own administration. Throughout most of its history, American politics has been dominated by political parties. The Constitution is silent on the issue of political parties, and at the time it came into force in 1789, no organized parties existed. Soon after the first Congress convened, political factions began rallying around dominant Washington administration officials, such as Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Concerned about the capacity of political parties to destroy the fragile unity holding the nation together, Washington remained unaffiliated with any political faction or party throughout his 8-year presidency. He was, and remains, the only U.S. president never affiliated with a political party. The incumbent president is Joe Biden, who assumed office on January 20, 2021. With more than 2 centuries worth of U.S. presidential elections, the historical ledger is filled with an array of facts. For example, when Donald Trump was named the 45th president, he was really only the 44th president because Grover Cleveland is counted twice. And with Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution stating that a citizen has to be at least 35 years old to become president, John F. Kennedy came the closest to that limit by earning election at age 43. Learn about the only bachelor to be elected president, the 4 candidates to have won the popular vote and lost the election, and more. The 2000 and 2016 elections were not the only times a candidate won the popular vote but lost the election. It has happened 5 times in our nation's history. In 1824, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote but got less than 50% of the electoral votes. John Quincy Adams became the next president when he was picked by the House of Representatives. In 1876, Samuel Tilden won the popular vote but lost the election when Rutherford B. Hayes got 185 electoral votes to Tilden's 184. In 1888, Grover Cleveland won the popular vote but lost the election when Benjamin Harrison got 233 electoral votes to Cleveland's 168. In 2000, Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the election to George Bush. In the most highly contested election in modern history, the U.S. Supreme Court stopped the Florida recount of ballots, giving Bush the state's 25 electoral votes for a total of 271 to Gore's 255. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 48.2% of the total popular vote to Donald Trump's 46.1%, but lost the election to Trump. Trump won 306 electoral votes to Clinton's 232. Grover Cleveland was elected president, 1884, then lost his re-election campaign, 1888, and came back again to win the presidency for a second time. 1892. Donald Trump is the nation's 45th president, but in reality there have only been 44 presidents. Grover Cleveland is counted twice as our 22nd and 24th president because he was elected for 2 non-consecutive terms. Only 13 U.S. presidents have been elected to office for 2 terms and served those 2 terms. The longest-serving president was Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was elected to office for 4 terms prior to the 22nd Amendment. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and will to the best of my ability, preserve, protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution has only 3 requirements for a president. 1. Must be at least 35 years old, 2. Have lived in the United States at least 14 years, and 3. Be a natural-born citizen. John F. Kennedy is the youngest elected U.S. president at 43. He is also the first Catholic president. Joe Biden is the oldest elected U.S. president at 78. The only president and vice president to never be elected to the office was Gerald Ford. He became vice president when Spiro Agnew resigned and became president when Nixon resigned. The tallest U.S. president was Abraham Lincoln at 6'4". The shortest U.S. president was James Madison at 5'4". James Buchanan is the only bachelor to be elected president. 8 presidents have died in office. William Henry Harrison, pneumonia. Zachary Taylor, gastroenteritis. Abraham Lincoln, assassin. James Garfield, assassin. William McKinley, assassin. Warren Harding, heart attack. Franklin D. Roosevelt, cerebral hemorrhage. John F. Kennedy, assassin. Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are the only divorced men to be elected president. James Monroe received every electoral vote but won in the 1820 election. A New Hampshire delegate wanted George Washington to be the only president elected unanimously. The U.S. Marine Band has played at every presidential inauguration since 1801. President John Tyler is believed to be the first to use "Hail to the Chief" as the official presidential honors. President Bill Clinton was born William Jefferson Blythe but took his stepfather's last name when his mother remarried. He formally changed his name to William Jefferson Clinton when he was 15. Victoria Woodhull became the first woman to run for president in 1872. Hillary Clinton became the first woman to be nominated for president by a major party ticket in 2016. Jeanette Rankin of Montana became the first woman elected to Congress in 1916. John Mercer Langston became the first elected black politician in the United States in 1855 when he was elected town clerk in Brown Helm, Ohio. President Barack Obama was the first African American president. 12 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were 35 years old or younger. Martin Van Buren was the first natural-born American to become president in 1837. Each of the 7 previous presidents were born as British subjects. Article 2, Section 1, of the Constitution states, before he enter on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. How does the presidential election work? When Americans vote for President and Vice President of the United States, they are actually voting for presidential electors in the Electoral College. According to the Constitution, each state is assigned a number of electors equal to the combined total of the state Senate and House of Representatives delegations. Today, there are 538 electors. The number of electors per state ranges from 3, District of Columbia, to 55, California. To be elected President of the United States, a candidate needs a majority of 270 electoral votes. The Founding Fathers of America once decided that one elected person should lead the executive branch. Now known as the U.S. President, this governmental structure has remained true for the past 200 years. Learn more about the people who assumed office with these U.S. presidents' facts. The U.S. has had 45 presidents. 12 of the U.S. presidents owned slaves, and 8 of them enslaved people while in office. 26 of the U.S. presidents were lawyers, 29 of the U.S. presidents served in the military, 4 U.S. presidents won the Nobel Peace Prize, T. Roosevelt, W. Wilson, J. Carter, and B. Obama. Of all the U.S. presidents, only 8 of them are left-handed. The only left-handed U.S. presidents include James Garfield, Herbert Hoover, Harry S. Truman, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H. W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. However, 33rd U.S. President Truman was forced into right-handedness at a young age. Only 3 out of 45 U.S. presidents have been impeached. Congress has formally impeached U.S. Presidents Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. Still, there have been no U.S. presidents removed from office through impeachment. 4 U.S. presidents have been assassinated while in office. U.S. Presidents Abraham Lincoln, 1865, James A. Garfield, 1881, William McKinley, 1901, and John F. Kennedy, 1963, all met the same unfortunate fate while serving the highest office in the U.S. This might as well be the saddest U.S. president's facts on the list. Outside of assassination, 4 other U.S. presidents died of other causes. William Henry Harrison died from pneumonia in 1841 while Zachary Taylor suffered from inflamed stomach and intestines in 1850. Meanwhile, heart attack claimed Warren Harding in 1923, and cerebral hemorrhage caused Franklin D. Roosevelt's demise in 1945. Some U.S. presidents were preserved in memory by being on U.S. currency. The $1 dollar bill and quarter feature George Washington, the $2 dollar bill and nickel display Thomas Jefferson. Meanwhile, the $5 dollar bill and penny depict the image of Abraham Lincoln, and the $10 dollar bill stars Alexander Hamilton. Moreover, Andrew Jackson appears on the $20 dollar bill, Ulysses S. Grant on the $50 dollar bill, Benjamin Franklin on the $100 dollar bill, and Franklin D. Roosevelt on the dime. The 4th of July is a significant date in U.S. history. Among the first 5 U.S. presidents, 3 died on the fateful date of 4th of July, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in 1826 and James Monroe in 1831. On the other hand, John Calvin Coolidge was the only president born on this date in 1872 in Plymouth Notch, Vermont. John Adams' final words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Unbeknownst to him, the other U.S. president had already died only hours before he did. Adams and Jefferson might have been close friends and correspondents, but they also had rivalry back then. The first U.S. president, George Washington, did not attend college at all. This also makes him the only major founding father without a college education. At age 15, young George left school as his family could not afford a college education for him. However, he had taught himself in many fields like countryside knowledge and map making, skills that helped him serve well in the French and Indian War wherein he fired the first shot. George Washington is and will remain to be the highest-ranking member of the U.S. military. A joint resolution passed on July 4, 1976 posthumously promoted Washington to the title of General of the Armies of the United States. As it makes George Washington the only 6-star general of the United States, it only ensures that no other military member can ever outrank him. In 1798, John Adams passed the creation of the United States Marine Band. Also known as the President's Own, this congressional act signed by the second U.S. president gave birth to the oldest active professional musical organization in the U.S. Aside from playing at the first ever New Year's celebration at the White House, the band also played at the inauguration of Thomas Jefferson. Third U.S. President Thomas Jefferson designed the swivel chair. While a different person constructed the original chair, Jefferson added modifications into what is now also known as the revolving Windsor armchair. He placed an iron spindle between the top and bottom half, making the chair able to rotate on the casters. Later on, Jefferson used the chair as he wrote the Declaration of Independence. The fourth U.S. President James Madison is the shortest president. Madison only stood at 5 feet 4 inches. Or 163 centimeters high. How's that for neat U.S. President's facts? Aaron Burr, Thomas Jefferson's vice president, killed a man while in office. The third vice president of the United States fatally shot his rival, Alexander Hamilton, during a duel or an affair of honor. While the event makes Burr guilty of murder in New York and New Jersey, he returned to Washington, D.C. to finish his term while immune from prosecution. Fifth U.S. President James Monroe is the last president from the Founding Fathers. His first presidential term was also known as the Era of Good Feelings. This period witnessed national unity after the War of 1812, where the Federalist Party collapsed. Hence, the country transitioned into a one-party government. After Washington, James Monroe was the only U.S. president to run without serious opposition. Monroe was up for a second term in 1820. However, no opposing candidates competed against him. All but one electoral vote supported James Monroe's re-election, but only to preserve the complete vote record of Washington. James Monroe is the only person to have held two cabinet positions at once. He served as Secretary of State and Secretary of War in James Madison's presidential cabinet. After Monroe's two-term presidency, he had already served his country for a total of 50 years, holding the most elected public offices among other presidents. Sixth U.S. President John Quincy Adams was known for his hobby of skinny dipping. Being the son of the second U.S. president, Adams was the first second-generation president to assume the position. Aside from this feat, Adams' morning routine was to take plunges in the Potomac River every 5 in the morning. Andrew Jackson was the only U.S. president to have been a former prisoner of war. The seventh U.S. president was only 13 years old when he served as a courier in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. However, he and his brother Robert were taken as prisoners. Jackson received a punishment which caused a distinct permanent scar on his face. Martin Van Buren was the first president that was born an official U.S. citizen. Van Buren was born on December 5, 1782. While he was already the eighth person to assume the position, Van Buren was the first president born after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Ninth U.S. President Henry Harrison served the shortest presidential term with only 31 days. However, Harrison gave the longest inauguration speech to date, which lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes. The fact that he talked for that long while being out in a snowstorm was what made him suffer and die of pneumonia a month later. 10th U.S. Pres. John Tyler fathered the most known children by any president with 15. Letitia Christian, his first wife with whom he had 8 children, died of a stroke in 1842. During this time, Tyler was only 1 year into his first and only term. He remarried with Julia Gardner in 1844 and had another 7 children with her. James K. Polk was often labeled as the first dark horse president. The 11th U.S. president was the last among the Jacksonians to ever sit in the White House. Moreover, Polk was the last strong president until the Civil War. 12th U.S. President Zachary Taylor did not learn about his nomination for weeks. The Whig Party nominated him in 1948 without his knowledge or presence. When they sent the notification to Taylor, the latter had to pay for the postage, so he refused and remained innocent of his nomination for a few weeks. Millard Fillmore was the last president unaffiliated with the Democratic or Republican parties. Together with his wife, the 13th U.S. president founded the first permanent White House library. He was even reported to have raced to fight a fire that caught the Library of Congress in December 1851. Later on, Fillmore signed a bill to fund the replacement of the destroyed books. Millard Fillmore was a U.S. president who lived the dream of teenage schoolboys. His first wife Abigail Powers was his teacher back when he was a student at the New Hope Academy, New York. Fillmore was only 19 years old then. Franklin Pierce was ranked brigadier general despite never serving the military before. The 14th U.S. president appealed to 11th President Polk to allow him to serve as an officer in the Mexican-American War. Pierce proved helpful as he led a group of volunteers at the Battle of Contreras. Despite being injured after falling off his horse, Pierce later helped capture Mexico City. James Buchanan was the only president who remained a bachelor for life. Speculations from renowned historians and writers have claimed the asexuality of the 15th U.S. president. Volumes of Buchanan's papers and letters have never mentioned anything about love, lust, romance, or physical attractions to either sex. Still, evidence suggests that both his and the king's nieces destroyed letters from their correspondence following his victory in the 1856 presidential election. The 15th U.S. president has been known to regularly buy slaves in Washington, D.C. However, it was not for the usual reasons. It appears that James Buchanan buys these slaves only to set them free quietly in Pennsylvania. 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln holds the record for the tallest president. His height of 6 feet 4 inches or 193 centimeters goes a long way from that of Madison. Lincoln was also said to be a president of firsts. He was the first bearded U.S. president, the first to be born outside of the 13 original states, and the first to appear in an inaugural photograph. The said photo even captured Lincoln's murderer, John Wilkes Booth, standing on a balcony above. Abraham Lincoln was the only U.S. president to have a patent. In May 22, 1849, Lincoln patent number 6469 for his invention, a device that frees steamboats that run aground. Despite only having around 18 months of formal schooling, Lincoln was still able to practice law without a degree. Andrew Johnson was dubbed as the best-dressed president. His mother sent young Johnson to apprentice with a tailor. Thanks to his acquired knowledge and skills, the 17th U.S. president was able to make his own clothes and suits. Ulysses S. Grant lacked any political experience prior to his presidency. Even so, the 18th U.S. president successfully won the first major Union victory of the Civil War. The Republican Party still nominated Grant despite not having any experience or interest in politics, which later earned the political novice bad critics for the issues during his administration. Grant acknowledged the claims anyway. Rutherford B. Hayes was the first and only president elected by a congressional commission. Also, the 19th U.S. president was the first president to take the oath of office privately in the Red Room of the White House. 2 days later, Hayes still took the public oath. This event followed the debated election results and the incident of the inauguration day falling on a Sunday. Hayes was the only president that the Civil War has wounded. The 4 times that horses were shot down from beneath him came with 4 injuries for R. Hayes. James Garfield became a president of a college before being the 20th U.S. president. He graduated from Williams College in Massachusetts and then went to the Eclectic Institute to teach. In 1857, Garfield was only 26 years old when he became its president. Aside from serving this position, Garfield was also studying law and serving as an Ohio state senator at the same time. James Garfield was ambidextrous. As if it is not amazing enough, the 20th U.S. president could also write Latin with one hand and Greek with the other, all at the same time. 21st U.S. President Chester A. Arthur held the first ever White House yard sale. Back in 1881, Arthur sold 24 wagons full of stuff from the White House, practically selling anything that was not nailed down. These efforts raised money to buy new furniture for the house. Benjamin Harrison was the first president to enjoy electricity in the White House. However, the 23rd U.S. president and his wife were too scared of touching the light switches themselves for fear of electrocution. In 1889, Harrison put up the first White House Christmas tree. Harrison even put on the Santa suit himself for the entertainment, especially for his tight-knit family whom he loves to amuse. Grover Cleveland was the only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Both the 22nd and 24th U.S. president, Cleveland also literally tipped the scales at over 250 pounds. This reason might explain his nickname, Uncle Jumbo. Frances Clara Folsom became the youngest First Lady when she married Cleveland. She was only 21 when she became the first woman to marry a president in the White House as well. Like her husband, Frances also served as the 23rd and the 25th First Lady of the United States. In 1897, William McKinley delivered the first filmed presidential inauguration. While the 25th U.S. President was re-elected in 1900, his second term did not last that long. Anarchist Leon Czolgosz shot McKinley on September 6, 1901. Eventually, his death 8 days later marked McKinley as the third American president assassinated while in office. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest president to serve. His election for vice president came on a ticket alongside President William McKinley. However, Teddy had to become the 26th U.S. president when McKinley was assassinated in 1901. He was only 42 years old then. The 26th U.S. president also fell victim to an assassination attempt. Theodore Roosevelt was delivering a speech in Milwaukee when the shot hit him. However, Roosevelt proceeded to complete his 90-minute speech with the bullet in his chest all throughout. William Howard Taft was the heaviest U.S. president. There were times that the 27th U.S. president would tip the scales over 300 pounds, which is nearly equivalent to 136 kilograms. In 1915, Taft even encountered an infamous hotel tub mishap wherein it had to be destroyed just for him to be able to get out. The 27th U.S. president swore 2 other presidents into power. After serving his presidential term, Taft went to serve as Chief Justice. It was from this position that he administered the oath of office of fellows Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. Woodrow Wilson was the first president to make a live remote national radio broadcast. It was only shortly before his death in November 1923 when the 28th U.S. president addressed a national audience from his home in Washington, D.C. prior to the Armistice Day. The next day, around 20,000 people showed up at his house just for a few more words. The $100,000 bill displays Woodrow Wilson's face. However, only a few selected people have ever laid hands on the bill. The design of the bill was mainly for the trade between Federal Reserve banks until it fell out of fad due to wire transfer intervention. While the Wilson bill still works in legal tender, it is nearly impossible to find someone that can break the change. Warren G. Harding worked as a newspaper reporter before becoming the 29th U.S. president. Ever since he was in college, Harding has already shown interest and talent in writing and journalism. He later performed various tasks for the Marion Mirror, a Democratic-leaning newspaper that contrasts the Republican politics of the Harding family. While in office, Calvin Coolidge is the first president to visit Cuba while still in office. The 30th U.S. president remained the only one to visit Cuba until Barack Obama did so as well in 2016. When Coolidge arrived in Havana for a conference, the warm reception pleased the president too much that he even broke his laconic stature to take a bow. The 30th U.S. president has a reputation for being a tough boss. Reports tell of Coolidge randomly pressing all the buttons in the Oval Office. As the bells rang throughout the White House, Coolidge would then hide to watch his staff run in just to see who was working or not. Herbert Hoover was already a self-made millionaire before becoming president. After graduating with a degree in geology from Stanford University, the 31st U.S. president spent his 20s trotting across the globe and locating valuable mineral deposits. Hoover wrote the first presidential biography for another president. He wrote numerous books after his service in office, one of which is The Ordeal of Woodrow Wilson. Hoover's son had 2 pet alligators. The ex-president would even let these unusual pets run loose throughout the White House occasionally. Franklin D. Roosevelt is and will remain to be the only U.S. president to win 4 terms. Unfortunately, the 32nd U.S. president died not long after being re-elected for his 4th term. His record will remain that way due to the ratification of the 22nd Amendment in 1951, which declared that no person shall be elected president more than twice. 33rd U.S. President Harry S. Truman survived an assassination attempt in 1950. With the White House under renovation, Truman was staying at Blair House when 2 Puerto Rico nationalists tried to kill him. However, a White House guard died valiantly instead. Truman even heard the gunfight from his room. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first U.S. president to oversee all 50 states. The state of Hawaii only received statehood on August 21, 1958. While Eisenhower was already 34th down the history of leaders, he was the first to govern all 50 starting in his 6th year in office. Eisenhower was one of the U.S. presidents who served in the military. More particularly, he was one of the only 9 men to ever attain the military rank of 5-star general. Eisenhower's military career covered both world wars, but he never participated in active combat. John F. Kennedy was the youngest elected president. The 35th U.S. president was only 43 when he took office in the White House, serving from 1961 to 1963. JFK donated all of his congressional and presidential salaries to charities. As he was able to live off his family's trust fund, the 35th U.S. president freely gave his salary amounting to $100,000 per year. JFK's generosity benefited charities such as the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America and the United Negro College Fund. Lyndon B. Johnson almost died in World War II. While he was about to board his plane, L. Johnson had to use the restroom. Upon his return, Johnson had to board a different plane. Had he not, Johnson would not have become the 36th U.S. president and would instead be killed in a plane crash. Despite serving various administrative positions, Richard M. Nixon never saw combat in the Pacific. The 37th U.S. president served as a lieutenant commander in the Navy back in World War II. Nixon was the first president to visit a nation not recognized by the American government. In 1972, Nixon took a unique trip to China as the United States recognized Taiwan as mainland China's legitimate government. Gerald R. Ford was the only president who was not elected by the U.S. voters. It is applicable in both the president and vice president position. In 1973, incumbent President Nixon appointed Ford as his VP following the resignation of then VP Spiro Agnew. When the only president who resigned did, Ford was in place to become the 38th U.S. president. Before becoming president, Gerald R. Ford was once a fashion model. Ford's modeling days lasted throughout in college, even managing to make the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine. 39th U.S. President James Carter received a Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Carter's award recognized his decades of finding peaceful solutions to international conflicts, as well as advancing democracy, human rights, and the economy. James Jimmy Carter filed a UFO sighting report in 1973. Although it's still debated whether aliens exist, James Carter described a UFO sighting as the darndest thing I've ever seen. Ronald Reagan was the oldest president to be elected. When he took office in 1981, the 40th U.S. president was already 69 years old. Reagan served in the office until 1989. Reagan received the Most Nearly Perfect Male Figure Award in 1940. This award from the University of California comes with the prize opportunity to pose nude for an art class learning to sculpt the human body. George H.W. Bush shared the longest marriage of any first couple with his wife. The 41st U.S. president met his wife Barbara in 1941. Despite still being teenagers back then, they got married after just 2 years of meeting each other. Eventually, they died just within months of each other in 2018. Bush survived a plane shooting incident in September 1944. He was flying over Japan when shots were fired upon his aircraft in the Pacific. While Bush and a crewman managed to bail out, the latter's parachute malfunctioned, dragging him down with the plane. A submarine by the Shishijima coast rescued Bush eventually. 42nd U.S. President William Bill Clinton won 2 Grammys. He received them for his album entitled Prokofiev, Peter and the Wolf/Be Intus, Wolf Tracks, and his autobiography titled My Life. Mathematics supports Clinton's charm. No, it has nothing about him being from the South. His secret is behind his symmetrical face, which serves as an essential component in a human being attractive. Moreover, Clinton ranks among male models in terms of facial symmetry. George W. Bush is the only president who has ever run a marathon. In 1993, 2 years prior to his becoming the governor of Texas, the 43rd U.S. president finished the Houston Marathon with a record of 3 hours 44 minutes and 52 seconds. Theobald Bush was captain of the cheerleading team of his alma mater. He graduated high school from Phillips Academy in Massachusetts, where he also had a frat boy past. 44th U.S. President Barack Obama won 2 Grammy Awards. Both of the awards are for Spoken Word Album of the Year. First, Obama received it for Dreams from My Father in 2006 and second for The Audacity of Hope's audio version in 2008. Barack Obama was the second president to take the oath of office 4 times. The 44th U.S. president made a wording mistake in his oath for his first inauguration in 2009, so he had to retake it the next day. Hence, his total of 4 places him second only to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Donald J. Trump is the owner of 18 golf courses across the globe. While the 45th U.S. president never filed for personal bankruptcy, he has filed bankruptcy for his business properties 6 times between 1991 and 2009. At one point, Trump partly owned 3 major beauty pageants. From 1996 to 2015, Trump was part owner of Miss Teen USA, Miss USA, and Miss Universe. R. Nixon and F. Roosevelt were the only people who appeared on a national presidential ticket 5 times. Both have won the election in 4/5 of the races. Nixon won vice president in 1962 and 1956, then president in 1968 and 1972. Meanwhile, FDR won 4 presidential elections and lost a VP election in 1920. Thank you for watching this video.